Hello, students. Welcome to lecture number 9. This week, we're going to talk a lot about some transport security issues. In other words, some logistics issues, and also keeping your freight safe, how to transport it, etc. Okay. So, some time ago, there was, September 11th, 2001, obviously. Ever since then, there's been a greater internationally and domestically in the US, there's been greater focus on security of cargo to ensure that, nothing inappropriate or dangerous crosses country borders through various countries. There's a thing that we've passed in over 80% of uh, ports, and it's operational ports throughout the world. And basically, it's called the Container Security Initiative. You really need to take these steps in order to A, protect your cargo, but B, also to get your cargo through customs pretty quickly in whatever port you're sending it through. There's a thing we may have talked about sport, but called the CTPAT, and basically, in the U.S. anyway, and other countries have similar. We have this partnership where, with our custom brokers, anything we're bringing in, we're basically having certification, if you will, that we have such and such steps of security, and it gives us advantages of coming in through customs faster, et cetera, et cetera. This is a good video to watch. Look at the bottom of this YouTube video. I would look through that, and that explains the process well. Now, coming back to these, this is voluntary. The CTPAT, it's voluntary, but sorry about that phone call. But you don't, again, it's not required per se, but it gives you a lot of benefits. When cargo is being inspected coming into the country, you are go to the front of the line. The wait times are shorter. Um, you get there's just a lot of advantages that you'll have if you are the subject to this voluntary program. So I would recommend it. It's just very useful, and you're going to look good getting your cargo in and out quickly, uh, out of your into your import ports, regardless of where you go. I've had some shipments that have sat for months in different countries just because of administrative issues where they wouldn't clear quickly. Right. In when the representations you make and the certification, quote unquote, you have is that you do a number of things. Your warehouses, where your product is, your goods are stored, both by your plant and then during the chain of shipping. If you have to use warehouses, it has appropriate security, limited physical access, so not just anybody can walk in and put something in your cargo. Um, NASBITE then has us jump to labeling requirements. And anytime that you purchase something, and food is a good example because it's so prominent, it's easily read by you when you buy food, but you will see that they will have packing requirements uh, that label what's inside, et cetera, et cetera. So, for example, I pulled up a couple here. I think this is FTC Federal Trade Commission, and you can see that the four things that you just must have on it. Another example here is textile, wool, and fur products. That's a real touchy one because of competition from outside the US, but essentially, the you have to include all these things on your labeling when you bring it into the US, and usually when you send it out as well. Packing materials, we've covered this to a certain extent going forward, and basically, when I'm not just sending it in town, if you will, but I'm sending it on ship, and it may be on a ship for 30 days, then obviously you have to worry about a lot of protection of whatever you're sending. In addition to that, there's international standards for depending on what you're sending. If you use wood in a crate, in a pallet, for example, it has to be fumigated. It has to follow some steps. So with your freight forwarder or your packing department, make sure you use that. Now, if you're sending to the EU, for example, there are various regulations that basically require one to minimize waste. So it's known as responsible packaging. And yeah, when you see directive in the EU, it really means it's a law, but it's called a directive. But essentially, because it gets adopted by the individual states. But in any event, you have to ensure that that you're careful with what you send that doesn't have excessive material and is not readily recyclable. So those are a couple of the important standards. You can take a look at this. I have a hypertext link for you, the essential requirements for packaging. Now, I've got a website that I'm going to jump to, but basically, this is a good example of the labeling that you need if you have what's known as dangerous goods. So, in addition to listing where it came from, physically what it is, etc., there are various regulations that require us to put specific labels on our product if indeed they have potential harm. You've probably seen these going down the road, and a truck goes by you with some of these labels. So let's go through these. All right, I'm going to jump to this website. Pardon me while I change the share. So I've included this hypertext link that I think is a really good. I think it's Kim Safety Pro Company, but they have done a good job of showing the labels, the various labels that are required depending on the classes of goods. So dangerous goods, explosive, potentially explosive substances, and you'll see the type of things labels that you will have to have. Now, let me show you something that you're probably more familiar with, and this is the flammable uh, gases. So you've probably seen some of these labels with the red, and the ones on the right, for example, are non-toxic, but they may still be flammable. Number three, specifically flammable liquids. You may have seen that. I'll just show you a couple more. Toxic and infectious substances. If you haven't seen these on trucks in transport, you've seen them in horror movies. But essentially, these are labels. And again, if the product that you are shipping contains any material that is subject to this, you have to make sure you label it appropriately. Okay, let's jump to radioactive finally. And you may have seen that as well in either on a truck, hopefully not if you're too close to it, but also in movies and video games as well. So again, those are labels that are required on your packaging to ensure the not only the customer, but often when it's emergency responders, if there's a crash or something like this, they want these kind of items so that they know how to respond. Is it a corrosive chemical that we need to put such and such agent on, etc. So it's really a safety precaution that protects everyone in the distribution or supply chain. All right, let's jump back to another share. I beg your pardon. Okay, we've already talked about that in a previous uh, packing materials. What you'll see on international transport is obviously you're going to often, unless you're shipping liquids or gas or something, a lot of time a product will be palletized or put on a pallet, whether it's wood or synthetic, or put in cases or crates. You should, to a certain extent, waterproof them because it's going to be on the ocean. Make sure the corrosive nature. of the the air and whatnot. This is a key concept to recall. Just that there are different types of containers. Dry storage, we've talked about those, and we're going to jump to a website in just a minute to look at them. Reefers, you might have heard about, are refrigerated containers. I'm transporting beef, from Australia to Asia Pacific. So, if you'll bear with me, I'm going to jump to the website, and I'm going to apologize ahead of time if there are a bunch of advertisements on this website, but it really is a good site for showing the different kinds of containers. So obviously the first thing we started out was a dry storage container. You've seen that. That is standard, two different sizes, roll in, roll out. It's really good for things that are in a crate or whatnot, especially at pallets. Flat rack, that may be something that is you can load from the top, real easy to put on a train car. It might be that it extends above the normal top of this type of box. So, for example, big oil and gas equipment in our part of the country, et cetera, it might be taller. So you would probably need a flat rack that permits it to extend beyond what would otherwise be the top. Open top container, again, some cargoes you'll have this, whether you need air, whatever you need, um, and they'll just have lashing rings on the top of that. Tunnel container, in and out. It may be that some kind of products, it's difficulty unless you're able to open it two ways. And so they have this tunnel container. Open side, obviously you can see that. Now, some people might use that for literally packing boxes, for example. You can walk in from the side and walk out. Uh, Double door, you'll see that. Refrigerated. Again, we talked about you're sending beef, you're sending meats or fruits and vegetables. You'll see all the machinery there at the end of the reefer that is going to have temperature control as that is going across. Yet, you still see that the size is consistent with the first container we saw on this website to ensure that you can do intermodal or multimodal shipping. Some are just insulated. You don't actually have to have independent refrigerated, but it's insulated for temperature control. Tanks, obviously, let's say I'm shipping natural gas, I'm shipping whatever that needs to be contained within that. There's also a cargo storage roll container. You can put stacks of material, that might be thick. It allows easy movement. You'll see the rollers on the bottom. Half weight containers, half height, excuse me. Let's say that I have something that its packaging requires it only to go up a certain height, or I have heavy mining. I don't want to be top heavy on my container because my truck is going to roll over to the side. So I'll have these half height containers, and as you see, you can stack one on the other. Car carriers, hey, self that's self-explanatory, but you also have a big roll-on, roll-off ships as well that don't require these containers. Bulk shift containers. Um, this is usually just intermediate. They're not. Uh, it's just, let's say your plant sends it to a facility at a port, and it's not final packaging uh, or preparation for transport. So you would just send it in these intermediates till they get to the port where you do final. Drum, uh, I some do bulk transport liquid materials, but this is a rather unusual configuration, but some use it this way. But you see, this is not standard for large container ships. Let's see. Special purpose containers, custom fit. That's basically all they're saying. Custom fit for your cargo. Swap body. This is kind of cool. In Europe, you see these. They're not, they have a convertible top that you can change it. I don't know why Chuck Norris wants us to not eat bananas, but anyway. All right. So that's kind of an interesting to me anyway, as a nerd. website on the different types of containers that you may use, and you will need to tell your freight forwarder sometimes, hey, it's such and such dimensions, and so they know where to pack it and what type of containers to hire, et cetera, et cetera. Insurance, we've talked about this somewhat. Incoterms, we're going to talk about again in a subsequent week, but basically, when you're selling items, you will come up with an agreed Incoterm with your customer, which says who has responsibility for paying for insurance during transport. Now, don't just plan on suing the ship if it goes under or airlines if it goes under, et cetera, because the strength, political influence that these companies or industries have, there are very limited uh, recoveries that you can get in the event of loss of cargo. Look at that on air cargo, for example, 12.95 per pound. What if you're shipping something that has the value of gold, you know? So this is um, you have to consider this is the why you would have insurance in addition to them having their own insurance. They'll probably insure the ship, but not your cargo. All right, transportation liability. We talked about general average. I would let you watch that video on your own again. Basically, if the ship goes down, or basically if they have to throw cargo off the ship to save it, bad weather, etc., you actually would have to contribute to payment for others' cargo, possibly. All right. Here's some more potential charges you might have. You might face in international transportation of your cargo. Demurrage, basically, there's a delay in cargo at one end or the other. And, you're going to be upset if you get charged this, and rightly so. But I mean, let's say there's a union strike at the docks in Singapore or something like that, then the warehouse there can literally charge you for your goods sitting there in the warehouse for such and such time, or you didn't arrange for it pickup in time. You get charged with demurrage, etc. Import cargo, it's when the consignee, the person you've authorized to pick it up, does pick it up in time. Export, you get it down to the port, but basically they don't get it onto the ship for some time. The harbors, basically, we're not in the business of just saving warehousing your goods. We transport, so you can't just have your freight sit here. We've got to keep things moving. We've talked about freight forwarders, how they're basically travel agents for your freight. Please keep in mind the distinction between a freight forwarder and a customs broker. Customs broker is the people on the other end that import your goods. Now, a good freight forwarder will do the entire thing for you if you're responsible for bringing it on the other end through a customs broker. Next, intermediaries. I'm going to go through this pretty quickly because we've covered this, most of it in a private previous week. Here's a key concept. Just know the distinction between intermodal and multimodal. Okay, same thing, but it depends on who's involved. You already know the four primary modes of transport: road, rail, air, ocean. Um, Key concept, just remember that standardized containers are usually 20 foot or 40 feet in length. Air freight covered. Contract carriers, that's just a term. Again, to, today I am just giving you various terms that you should be generally familiar with in international business, because you'll see these and you need to know what your freight forwarder or others are talking about when you're doing business with them. Some contract carriers will just act exclusively under contract to serve certain shippers. Or, for example, let's say you're a big oil company, you probably have either your own ships, or likely you will have a line of freight, a line of ships that contract with you. A reminder about consolidators. If you're shipping, but your products don't fill up an entire container, consolidators will actually take and can consolidate yours with others as well. A little more expensive, and frankly, it's a little more risky because they're moving other freight in and out of you with yours. 3PL, let you read that. That's self-explanatory. We talked about freight forwarders. I'm sorry that so much is redundant. The NASBITE materials, different sections written by different people, so there's overlap in various others in some of the weeks that we have. Power of attorney. Basically, please remember that a power of attorney is just a legal instrument that says I give someone else authority to do such and such. Some of you, unfortunately, may have an elderly grandparent or someone who, whether through loss of mental capacity or difficulties with medical issues, that they might have literally given you a power of attorney that you have authority to act on their behalf. Banking, health decisions, whatever it is. That's known as a power of attorney. Basically, you give someone else the legal authority to act for you. Well, in our international shipping context, that literally means we usually give that to our customs broker on the import side. We'll sign a power of attorney because then that permits them to import goods for us. So we will sign a limited power of attorney saying you have the authority to import for us, and that's it. Okay, a couple other research databases that you can look up on your own, but they're good resources for you when you're looking international transportation. All right, that's pretty quick. That was it for this week, and we will see you next week. Thanks.